Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. A few videos ago I promised you something special for my Nighthaunt Army centerpiece Nagash. Well, today is the day. I often say that a well-painted miniature isn't fully finished until his base has been taken care of. In this case, standing in front of such a massive miniature, I knew the only way to do him justice was to give him an equally majestic base. So if you've ever wondered if you should sculpt bases for your miniatures, or even how to approach a project this size, stay with me until the end to see how I did it and what I discovered along the way. The first thing I did was assemble Nagash, so that I could get a sense of his dimension and shape. As you can see, I didn't fully finish the assembly. I left off some parts like the head, the bones emerging from his back, and other bits so that I won't struggle to reach every spot when it will be time to paint it. Before I start sculpting, I need a clear vision of what I want to create. What I have in mind is the god of the undead standing on a rocky peak with ruins embedded in the stone, summoning a host of deadly ghosts that emerge from the rock at his skull. Now that I have a good idea of what I want to sculpt, I need to assess the surface that he needs to be able to stand. To help me design the pavement beneath his feet, I traced the outline of his contact points on a piece of cardboard. I designed the pavement area to be a bit smaller than the base. This will allow me to develop the peak, going from the wider base to the narrower top part, so I won't have a perfect cylinder that will result in looking unnatural. To create height, I grabbed the best tool in the entire crafting universe, an empty paper towel roll. Making my engineering degree pay off, I took this container of the desired height and used a marker to draw a line around the roll, giving me a well-defined and straight cut line. After gluing it to the base, I remembered all the Art Attack episodes I watched as a kid, and started applying some paper with a PVA glue to reinforce it. This makes it rock solid and prevents it from deforming under the weight of the miniature and the clay. Finally, to build the volume of the peak rocky sides, I grabbed some tin foil and started wrapping it around the paper roll in various layers until I was happy with the thickness. Keep in mind that the sculpting paste has its own thickness, so you have to be careful not to overdo the foil. Once finished, I had the perfect support for the pavement and the core of my structure. For the top of the peak, I wanted a brick pavement texture rather than bare rocks. In my mind, this is the floor of a sanctuary or a temple built ages ago, now crumbling beneath the god of death's feet. I carved the subfloor from a sheet of cork, using my cardboard template as a guide. Then it was finally time for the sculpting paste. To work with it efficiently, I used a square of glass that I also use as a palette for my oils, a plastic rolling pin, a sculpting knife, and a silicone sculpting tool. As you will see, these are basically all the tools that I'm going to use throughout the project, so if you want to replicate it or sculpt something for your miniatures, know that you don't need anything particular or expensive. Your imagination is your best tool. So, using my rolling pin, I started creating a nice flat surface, and once I reached the dimension of my cork base, I started trimming it, trying to create some irregular tiles along the edges. Then, to create the tiles pattern all over the surface, I started engraving it using my silicone sculpting tool. Now it's time for the biggest and the scariest section of the project, sculpting the whole rocky side of the peak. I started by flattening down a big chunk of clay, trimming it to fit the space between the base and the floor. Then I just laid it there, applying a little pressure to make it adhere to the tin foil. I repeated the same process till I covered all the tin foil with an even first layer. I then started modeling it by moisturizing my fingers with some water and passing them all over the junctions between the various pieces, smoothing it all down. While doing so, I also took advantage of the underlying tin structure by pressing the clay against it, creating some interest and depth without risking breaking through. Now the last thing to do was to give it some texture, so I rolled some foil into a ball and started dabbing it all over the surface, along with some bark to give it that nice layered feel. To add a bit more interest and depth to the sculpture, I wanted to add some crumbled pillars hanging on the side of the rock surface. I started defining the shape on a piece of cardboard and cutting it out to have a reference. Then, using my cardboard model, I proceeded to carve the pieces of my pillars. Once those pieces were almost dry, I started putting them together by remoisturizing the clay on the junction areas, using it as a binding agent. While my pillars were drying, I noticed that the base I built for Nagash perfectly fit him. But too perfectly. For what I had in mind, I need a bit more space. So I took a piece of clay and built a small protruding corner to extend the pavement, and blend it with the rest of the peak by adding some thin layers of rock, texturing it like the rest of the rockwork. I have to say that I'm really happy with this decision. It added even more depth to the peak and helped to make it look like it's crumbling away. Another thing I'm really happy about is how the stonework texture turned out. It has a certain sharpness due to the bark's jagged edges, but at the same time it's smooth. It almost feels like a raw flesh. I think this works beautifully for the mood of the scene and serves as a fitting base for the god of death himself. After smoothing out the pillars and adding the top and bottom sections, it was finally time to fit them on the base. The first thing I noticed was that the current angle of the bottom part, they were standing a bit too horizontal, and I needed them to stand a bit more vertically. To solve the problem, I used my sculpting knife to cut the base at the desired angle, removing the excess material. Once I was happy with how they fit, I proceeded to fix them in place with some fresh clay and a piece of steel wire, blending them with the rest of the rock with some more clay. Wanting to add a host of ghosts emerging from the base, I built a box of spirit hosts, which I planned on building differently than usual. In this case, instead of building the 3 ghost swarms, I built each ghost separately, allowing me to then place them independently on the base. In the end, I was left with 9 amazing spirits and some spare bits like these headstones that I will for sure add later to the scene. To glue the ghosts, I did some tests to see where they would fit better, and then using some super glue I proceeded fixing them in place. I wanted to position the spirits in a way that feels organic, creating a dynamic flow around the structure. They are going to be seamlessly integrated with the base, following the natural curves of the sculpture and blending with the environment as if they were emerging from the rock and that raw flesh texture. And this is what I was left with. Now, when fitting Nagash on the base, I felt like an element was still missing, something that will help tie it all together. So I came up with an idea. I started by putting some blue stuff in hot water to make it workable, and then proceeded to apply it over some areas of the Storm of Souls that supports Nagash on his original kit. Once cooled, my cast was ready, so I took some milliput and started mixing its 2 components. To better fit the cast, I tried to model the milliput to a similar size and shape before squeezing it in. While my cast was drying, I decided to make a good use of the extra space I built on the floor by setting his sword into it. To do so, I had to use my hobby knife to remove the hand, and then, using my clippers, remove a piece of the sword tip. When glued in place, I finally added some sprue glue to make it look like the sword was melting the stone. Now that the milliput has dried, I proceeded to remove it from the cast and to remove all the excess using my hobby knife. In the end, I'm really happy with the result. It really looks like part of Nagash's Storm of Souls, and I was even able to get some sharp elements like these skeletons and skulls. To finish it all off, I glued them to the base and filled the gaps using some more clay, trying to integrate them with the shapes of Nagash's own spirits, making them interact with the other elements of the base. And after a nice layer of primer, this is what I got. Well everyone, even this video has come to an end. I really hope you enjoyed watching me in the process of creating something different than the usual. It was the first time I tried to sculpt something this big and put all this effort into it. But hey, we are talking about Nagash, the centerpiece of my army, and I think he deserves it. I hope you found some inspiration from this video, and let me know if you're planning on sculpting an amazing base for your miniatures or some custom bits for your models too. As always, if you enjoyed the video, let me know with a like and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to keep moving forward into this big minis world.